Warning: the subject matter in this review is not suitable for those under the age of 18. If you are squeamish or easily disturbed, do not proceed with this video. Viewer discretion is advised.
You have been warned.
Back in the 1960s, people were beginning to become exposed to several different taboo documentaries, also known as Mondo films, and what will be known later today as shockumentaries. The first of its kind being Mondo Cane from 1962, and since Mondo Cane there have been several sequels and other films inspired by Mondo Cane, including Savage Man, Savage Beast, Goodbye Uncle Tom, etc. There was a small decline after the beginning of the Mondo films, and it started picking up around the age of the video store. In the late 70s and early and mid 80s, films like Death Scenes, Inhumanities, and the most notorious Faces of Death would come out on home video. Most of these films would follow in the same tradition as films like Mondo Cane, but in 1987, one film would come out to stand out from all the rest, and that is True Gore. True Gore is a film that has been requested to me several times, and I'm happy to finally be able to get around to doing it. And just for the record, there is no official release on DVD or Blu-ray of True Gore. The only place you could find it is online, or if you're able to be lucky to find a bootleg at a horror convention. So how exactly does True Gore stand out from many of the other shockumentaries released at the time? Much like other films including Faces of Death, True Gore has its own host and narrator. A lot of Mondo and shockumentary films released around this time heavily relied on a lot of staged footage, or footage that would later be debunked as fake. But for True Gore, I'm 99.9% sure that the majority of scenes in this are legitimate. After the narrator introduces himself, we are introduced to the question of what exactly is death. What we then see are bodies in morgues, fetuses, mutilated corpses, and bodies that have succumbed to rigor mortis. Next up is suicides. We see a photo of a man that tried committing suicide by blowing his head off with a shotgun, but he ended up living, and you see photos of his face basically reconstructed into a pretty big mess. There's a scene of a girl lying in a bathtub full of blood, and there's even audio recording of the Jim Jones cult performing their massive suicide. And then next is a topic called eroticism of death. S&M, pleasure of pain and death, whips and blood, people tied up, body mutilation, piss, and blood play. And if a lot of people don't think that's torture enough, well, the next part involves actual torture. And we see a lot of footage of people getting waterboarded and hit. Then we move into the one topic that a lot of people don't like when it comes to these Mondo and shockumentary films: animal cruelty. Remember in the first Traces of Death, the scene with the pig being burned alive? Well, that actually came from True Gore. And there's also a scene of scientists removing a cat's brain. In Art and Death, we see a weird home movie. A woman puts a worm in her vagina, genital mutilation, skulls, and there's a rock band that mutilates an animatronic pig. Basically parts of a pig carcass turned into this insane robot. Basically an MTV music video on bath salts. Then we see interviews with incarcerated necrophiliacs, and this is one instance where I question the authenticity of this scene in particular from True Gore. If you have any more information on if this scene is legit, or if any of the other scenes in this film are real or fake, definitely drop a comment down below. I'd love to hear what you guys have to say. Then we move on to science, and we see a lot of content from the Third Reich and Adolf Hitler, footage of the Holocaust including the gas chambers, footage of the dead bodies in the concentration camps getting pushed by a bulldozer, Nazis being executed after the Nuremberg trials, and then it goes into sort of the atomic age with this weird music that seems like a nightmarish MTV music video. The film then goes into showing off some graveyards, a couple mausoleums, and then that's the end. For a shockumentary from 1987, it definitely sticks out compared to other films like Faces of Death, being that there's definitely a lot more gore and a lot more destruction to be seen. It definitely fits the criteria of a low-budget, underground film that was passed around on VHS tapes during the late 80s. So, does True Gore stand out from the other films released at the time? Yes and no. Yes, being that it's a shockumentary. No, being that it feels a lot cheaper than a lot of the other films put out at the time. And it feels a lot more gritty and underground. And that's one reason why I think a lot of people appreciate True Gore. Now, much like other shockumentaries, there do exist sequels, and for True Gore, there is too its own sequel. True Gore 2, or commonly referred to as Empire of Madness, is something entirely different from the original film. The film starts off with footage of a guy getting his throat cut, which is obviously faked, but the special effects actually look pretty cool. And yes, it's a fake slit throat effect and a fake decapitation because this severed head just so happens to talk, and he's the narrator of the rest of the film. He's the one we all learn about death from, a talking, severed head. Think about that for a second. We then see footage of brains being removed from the skull, slaughterhouse footage, cutting chickens' throats, killing a cow, dissecting what looks like to be monkeys, and then that leads to more suicide footage. There's this one video of a guy that documents himself trying to kill himself after he finds out his girlfriend has been cheating on him, which looks entirely staged and a lot more faker than the execution from Faces of Death. He cuts his wrist and even gives a full narrative on what he's doing. And then we go into a horribly shot fake drive-by scene where a guy gets shot, but there is some good blood and gore in it. And the gore and the scene go on forever. I don't know what they were thinking with Part 2. It is definitely not a true sequel to True Gore, so I would just consider it as Empire of Madness and leave it at its own film instead of being a sequel. Yes, a lot of the time the sequels don't compare to the original, but True Gore 2 Empire of Madness just fucking sucks. It goes on for too long, and for Christ's sake, the narrator is a talking head. How many times do I have to say it? Now I know why I don't hear a lot of people talking about the sequel, because it's a piece of garbage. But in all seriousness, True Gore is definitely a film of the home video age that stands out as being more controversial for its time. If you can find a bootleg copy, I say definitely give it a watch. So that's gonna do it for today, guys. Thank you so much for coming by and checking out this review. If you're new to my channel, definitely hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for all my latest videos posted every Monday and Friday. And also make sure to follow me on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, to stay posted on what I'm doing behind the scenes of making these videos. Before you click off this video, don't forget to hit it with a thumbs up and leave me a comment down below saying if you've seen True Gore and the sequel Empire of Madness, and what do you think of both films? And also, tell me what shockumentaries you want me to cover, and also, what is the most disturbing shockumentary you've seen? Until next time, take care, and stay scared.